Welcome to VoteProPot-Cast, the award-winning cannabis news podcast brought to you by VoteProPot.com.
Well, hello again, ladies and gentlemen out there in VoteProPot land, and welcome to another episode of our humble podcast. We have a special guest on our show today, Ellen Scanlon, and we'll be bringing her on in just a moment. But first, a bit of sad news. Steve Fox, one of the key figures and really staunchest advocates in the cannabis legal reform movement, died this week. The cause of death has not been disclosed. Fox was a managing partner at the Denver-based VS Strategies. He was also a strategic advisor to the Cannabis Trade Federation. But Steve is probably best known as the lead drafter of Colorado's really first in the nation adult use legalization bill, which, as you know, passed in 2012. In recent years, Steve served at numerous organizations, including the DC-based National Cannabis Industry Association, as well as the Marijuana Policy Project, also based in DC. He was living in Bethesda, Maryland, at our neck of the woods at the time of his death, and Steve was 53. So our deepest condolences to Steve's family and loved ones. He will be missed.
Yeah, you know, Steve was not one of those guys in the limelight. You know, he was a behind-the-scenes guy. He wasn't like a social media influencer or one of those guys you see on the social media, Twitter and everything all the time.
No, very unassuming, very soft-spoken, but knew his stuff.
Yeah, if you want to hear a really brilliant guy on the subject of pro-legalization, Episode 96 was the last time we had him on. That was January 28th of 2020. Go to VoteProPot.com or go to Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and just do a search for VoteProPot and do a search for Steve Fox, and he'll pop up. Also, I'd like to mention that someone has started a GoFundMe page for Steve's wife and his two children, his wife Lisa and his daughters Jaden and Naomi. You can go to GoFundMe and it's support the family of Steve Fox. And we'll put a link in the show description so you can find it more easily.
We have a special guest today. Back in, if I have my facts correct, 2019, Ellen Scanlon, along with her colleague April Pride, founded for women an online educational platform called How to Do the Pot. It's been written up in leading publications such as, Forbes, High Times, Green Entrepreneur, just to name a few. The two also co-founded the popular Women's Cannabis Handbook, and I'm anxious to hear more about this, the High Guide, which provides practical advice to women who use weed, or maybe you're just curious about it. And Pride and Scanlon, that is to say Ellen and April, not respectively, were also chosen, boy did I mangle that, by High Times to be among the inaugural contingent of Female 50 honorees, which is a High Times showcase of the top 50 women from the world of cannabis. Please welcome to VoteProPot-Cast, Ellen Scanlon. Hi, Ellen. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. So, lots of women, millions of women now have access to legal cannabis one way or another. Are they actually consuming more cannabis now?
I think they are. In California, where I live, Ease, which is a delivery service, put out some data that showed that women, I think, were up to 49% of their customers from 32 or 33 just last year. So it's very rapidly, women are becoming an important consumer in cannabis. And I think that what's great about that is women make about 80 to 90% of household purchasing decisions in standard ways.
Right.
And so if you consider that as a demographic and you consider that they're coming to cannabis, figuring out what women want is going to be a really important part of business success in our view.
I would say so. What do you suppose is driving that growth in cannabis consumption?
Well, I think that women come to cannabis for a variety of reasons, but newer consumers in legal states seem to be coming to try and solve health problems that are not being solved in other ways. And
with traditional medicine, right?
Exactly. I talk to women all the time. Autoimmune diseases, for instance, affect about 8 to 10% of the population, but of that, 80% of the people who have autoimmune diseases are women. And these are diseases that are hard to diagnose. They come with a variety of different symptoms that often don't match up together. And I mean, the stories of women with Crohn's disease, with lupus, I have endometriosis, which isn't an autoimmune disease, but it is an underdiagnosed disease. And cannabis is absolutely transformational. I mean,
wow.
So I think that stories like that get passed on from friend to friend. And it's really starting to, migraines, for instance, mostly affect women. Cannabis is a great treatment. So I think a lot of women are coming to it to solve issues that aren't being solved in other ways. And then they find that it's an amazing plant and they start to figure out other ways to use it.
That is amazing. Now, I knew somebody very close to someone who had endometriosis, and it is debilitating. It is very, it can be very painful and hard. And so I imagine cannabis helps relieve that?
It does. So endometriosis is a disease that affects 1 in 10 women. Yet it takes 10 years on average to be diagnosed, and women see an average of 8 doctors. So you can imagine the expense and time and stress that comes with that. And it has a variety of symptoms. You can go to a great website called knowyourendo.com if you're curious about endometriosis. But I have painful periods, and I experienced infertility and a lot of other very challenging events. But CBD is an incredible pain reliever for me. So I no longer take any prescription pain medicine. I don't take any over-the-counter pain medicine.
Wow,
I use CBD, and it's just, if you've experienced chronic pain, the unpredictability of it is one of the things that makes it really hard to kind of live your life normally. And CBD has just added so much more predictability to how I can treat what's happening with me. And it's, I can't tell enough people about it.
So you were using traditional medicines before, prescribed, and they didn't do the trick, and then CBD did?
The pain medicine that I used worked for the pain, but the side effects were really bad.
Of course.
That's really the issue. It does treat the pain, but you just don't want to be taking pain meds like that, right?
Yeah, and I don't have any side effects with CBD at all. So that, and I think that there was a study last year that came out from the University of Chicago and Berkeley in California that said something like 80% of women have been overdiagnosed with medication because the drug studies were done on men. And so the side effects that women experience from very common drugs are so much worse because their bodies weren't studied as a part of whatever framework that exists. And I really think that there's just something to that I've experienced it. So many women I know have stronger reactions to standard medicines. And what I have found is for pain and for a variety of different things, cannabis can solve the problem that you're trying, that you're experiencing without the side effects.
Well, we've done a lot of stories, and there've been a lot of studies on the fact that, cannabis itself, the way it interacts in the body is totally different for men and women. So that makes sense. That makes total sense.
It does. It does.
Well, let's talk about the retail side for a second. We're talking about women in cannabis, and we've had a lot of women on the show, entrepreneurs and people starting companies, dispensary owners, lots of different guests. And I find it interesting personally that there is this kind of delineation between men and women when it comes to cannabis sales. And on that, and you've spoken to that before in your show, on your podcast, and other places. So I pulled up this article. It just came out a couple days ago in Marijuana Business Daily. And it says, with more women buying cannabis, product demand could change. The stats that I pulled out of here that are interesting that we'd like to get your comment on average, women make up about a third of the retail buyers for cannabis. So men are 2/3. But the interesting stats are what they buy. Men buy way more flower.
Right.
Women are found to buy the tinctures, the edibles, even vape pens.
Especially the beverages.
Beverages, absolutely. The beverages by far, 8-1 or something crazy.
Something ridiculous like that.
I mean, and I think women have become aware of that, especially the entrepreneurs starting businesses, because we have had many women on the show who are marketing specifically to women, and it seems to be working. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, those are the products that I like. I mean, I can't speak for all women, but I think that discretion, being able to control your dose is really important for women, that sometimes you just might want a little tiny bit of a dropper because you're feeling stressed or you're feeling uncomfortable. And other times you're like, hey, I can relax. I'll take a whole dropper. Right. And so dosage is really, I think, helpful for women.
And that's hard to do with flour, right?
It is. Yeah. And the discretion of a vape pen. I think that I heard your show on the cannabis beverages, and I just think that when there's a form factor that women are comfortable with, it's a lot easier to bring them into cannabis. And if cannabis feels like a big scary thing, or just something that you did a long time ago, or that you don't know really what to do with, that's already sort of a barrier. But if you can give women something that looks like maybe a cosmetic product they buy, or looks like the honey that they put into their tea,
right?
They have heard about cannabis. They're curious about it. They want to try and use it. And you're just offering up something that feels so familiar, and they want to try. So I think it's really a form factor and comfort thing.
So, and that seems like what your educational platform, How to Do the Pot, is all about. It's a demystifying cannabis for women. First of all, I want to know, where did the name come from? That's kind of an interesting name.
I like it.
I just think sounds kind of whimsical and fun, but also like there's something to learn here.
Oh, thank you. Well, when we were trying to come up with the show name, I spoke to a friend that worked at Spotify, and he said it really has to be catchy. And so that was in my head, and we were talking to friends and sharing ideas with them. And when people would ask what I was up to, I'd say, we're going to teach you how to do the pot, and everyone would laugh. And so as we were, looking at different names, we just thought, I think laughing when you step into this is perfect. That's exactly what we want. We want you to feel like this is fun. And then also that you're going to learn something. It's our shows are very practical. They're all under 30 minutes. They're scripted. They're tight. We have conventions where you'll get 5 practical tips on every single show. And in the same way that I just described women wanting something that they're familiar with, we're trying to create that same familiarity. So this is going to feel more like a show that you hear on NPR, or something that you're really comfortable with. We also made our shows really short. They're all under 30 minutes. Most of them are 5 to 15. I think about weed all the time because it's my job, but a lot of people don't. And so we want this to be like, the one time a week when you spend some time thinking about weed, and you walk away and you learn something and you had a little fun.
I think it's really smart. When your publicist reached out to us to have you on the show, I started listening to your podcast, and it's really good. I mean, it's very informative. It's very entertaining. And what I love about it is it's compact, It's 15 minutes, 10 minutes, I think that's smart. I think that's a really smart way to do an educational podcast. So you guys do a good job. Check it out. It's called How to Do the Pot. Right.
It's at dothepot.com.
Dothepot.com. There you go. I noticed you guys cover sex quite a bit. And that's a topic Phil really likes to talk about. So,
I like talking about sex.
It's
about all I can do nowadays is talk about it.
In all seriousness, though, you do talk about how that can help a woman's sex life, and I think men's do, but you take it from a woman's perspective. So talk about that for a minute.
Sure. Well, we were working on new episodes, and as you know, COVID has been kind of a slog. And so in
Yeah.
in December, we came up with a short series called Saturday Strains, where we chose the 12 essential strains for every woman's stash. And while we were doing the research for that, we realized that some of the strains are really great for sex. And February was coming up, and maybe we should just dedicate the whole month of February to sex.
I'm all for that.
So that's what we did. And it's really been fun. We have 3 shows. The first one is Sex with More Sensation. So it's about how cannabis can physically make sex more enjoyable if you suffer from any pain, which is something that some women do, how to feel more comfortable physically using cannabis. And then the next episode,
chronic pain can really stomp the life out of anybody's sex life. It really can. I mean,
absolutely.
It's awful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we have an episode about how cannabis can help you feel more mentally relaxed. So a lot of women talk about how, you're trying to have sex and it's like you can't get your to-do list out of your head. So we kind of go into how cannabis can be helpful for just mentally relaxing, allowing you to feel more comfortable and more connected to your partner. And then we had an episode dedicated to strains. And Stravinsky, who is a famous grower in California, came on, and a lot of women love gelato and pink panties, his strains for sex. And so we asked him, what makes a good strain for sex? And he had a kind of a surprising answer, which was, don't use too much THC.
Right. No, I agree.
So, those are the 3 episodes about sex.
Yeah, they were great. I mean, I make jokes about it, but no, it was really informative. Now, did you guys get into whether or not that is the case for men as well? Or is this pretty, and I'm talking about those strains, for example, does it work for men or is it different?
I've never tried pink panties.
No, I haven't tried pink panties either. I did see you in pink panties once, so I don't recommend it, Phil. Sorry.
Those pictures are not me, I'm telling you.
No, okay, back to reality. Does this work for men as well? Or is that a totally different thing?
Well, so this is the reason that we actually had the first 2 men we've ever had on as guests on our show. We had Stravinsky and we had Matthew Gerson, who is the founder of Foria, which is a sexual health company based in LA. Matthew is a wonderful advocate for sexual wellness and for women. And his advice really was, with men, watch out for THC. Don't use too much. It can really just kind of suck the life out of you.
You just zone out. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. You lose focus.
You lose focus and you lose the intimacy because you're zoned out.
Yeah,
I agree.
But he also said that the physical lubes, like the weed lubes and the weed serums, he has a wonderful quote in our show. He's like, if being more connected to your partner and having her feel more pleasure is wonderful for you, then that's what's great for men. But what's in it for men? Not so much. Okay. So I think the physical serums really are more for women.
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean,
fair enough.
And so much for that, Phil. So
we're
much
dogs.
For pink panties, bro. We'll have to move on with. Yeah. Well, listen. Congratulations on the High Times inaugural female honorees. They had 7,500 nominees?
Right.
Well, this is actually April Pride, not me. So April, who was the inaugural host of How to Do the Pot, founded a company called Vanderpop. And Vanderpop was purchased by Tokyo Smoke and then Canopy Growth. Right. And yes, I worked on the application and she is so well deserving of the award, but it was April.
Well, congratulations to April then.
Yeah, congratulations to April.
Now, tell me about the High Guide. Now, that was both of you, correct?
Yes. And April is actually going to be taking the High Guide further, and I will be taking How to Do the Pot further. I'm now the host of How to Do the Pot, and April is the host of the High Guide. And the tagline for the High Guide is "Be Out of This World." And she has 2 episodes that have been on the feed of How to Do the Pot, so you can listen to them. They're under the High Guide, and she'll have a few more. So you can hear what she's up to. This week, she went on a cannabis safari. So you can hear what that means.
Now that sounds really interesting. What is a cannabis safari?
I'm not sure I'd want to be tuned up and dealing with elephants and lions. To tell you the truth.
It was more, well, that's what she called it, but she talked to different women who use cannabis in different ways, in different forms. And so I think that was the concept behind the safari, just trying out all different ways to bring cannabis into your life. So she gets a lot of great guests who she calls high guides to guide you through it.
So if you had to isolate, Ellen, the some of the top or the top kind of barrier that prevents a lot of women from trying cannabis and using it, what would you say that is?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind for me is its legal status.
Okay.
I think that if you're not consuming cannabis already, it's probably not going to be something that a woman is going to seek out if it's not legal in her state. And I'm generalizing, but I just think that people who live in states where cannabis is illegal and use cannabis have hookups.
Yeah.
They figure
right.
it out. And if you don't, I mean, I'll just speak for myself. If I didn't have a hookup, then I, probably didn't have cannabis. And so having it be legal and being able to walk into a store and being able to just have people coming at you and saying, here, you can use cannabis for this or that, and trying to educate you. I think that really is what is bringing a lot of new women consumers into the market.
So that alleviates just that whole stigma about, good people don't smoke marijuana.
Right.
The question of stigma is so interesting. I think about it all the time. And I live in California, and I had someone tell me a few weeks ago that he thought that California was 15 years ahead of some of the states that are just coming online. And so I feel like when I don't think about stigma as much anymore, because now all the women that I know that live around me just want help.
Yeah.
They want to know what to get. And so they're really not thinking so much about the stigma because it's been legal here, for a while. And so, but in newer states, you were talking about Bethesda. I went to high school in Bethesda.
Oh, really?
I went to Walt Whitman.
Oh,
and,
Whitman. Okay.
I have friends that went to Walt Whitman.
Yeah, I went to University of Virginia. Virginia has just come on. And
Yep.
So I think about my friends in those states, and I definitely think that stigma is still a part of what's going to be at least going through their head when they're considering this as a decision. So I think that it really varies where you are.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think there's no question that stigma is there, because I know I'm in Virginia. We're brand new. But even still, I have friends who will say, I got my card, and I go to my dispensary and I get my medicine. And I have friends that say, oh, can you get me some? I said, no, I can't do that. You're not allowed to do that, and I'm not going to risk it. Get your card. And they don't want to. They're like, I don't want my name on a list. That stigma is still there. I mean,
yep.
And these are people who maybe smoked weed in high school, maybe in college, and then had kids and put the bong away and stopped doing it for years. And now that it's back, they're still nervous about it.
Well, and of course, around in our area, there are a lot of people working for the government who just can't afford it.
How did you get into this, Ellen? How did you get into cannabis as a career?
Yeah, I've always liked weed, and so I got my medical card in California in 2016. And just started paying attention to what was going on and what was out here. I was working at the time for a women's healthcare startup. I have a background. I worked on Wall Street and financial services for a long time, and was in my second startup. And I'd worked in these male-dominated industries, and then I joined this women's healthcare company and started to learn about all these health challenges that women face that I just didn't know anything about. At the same time, as I mentioned, I was struggling with infertility. So I was having sort of my own health challenges and trying to figure that out. And about that time, that's when April and I reconnected. April and I both went to University of Virginia, and she had founded VoteProPot, and I was working with different entrepreneurs to help them grow their businesses. And she and I came together and realized that we were kind of solving the same problems, that women wanted help. They wanted to feel better. And so we just kept talking about what we could do. And then I had a baby. I have a 2-year-old now. And we decided to come together and start this business. So it was really kind of a mixture of thinking about things from a women's healthcare perspective, liking weed. I worked in financial services, so I also understand the financial opportunity. And
Right.
I love startups, and I live in San Francisco. And it was like, this is just something that feels magical. You have to step into this.
You talk about microdosing on your podcast, and that's something we talk about a lot. I consider myself a microdoser.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I do.
Very
That's
much.
how I use cannabis. I don't sit down and do bong hits and, that's not me. I like edibles.
I can't even smoke a joint.
Right.
It's just way too much.
It's way too much. So you talk about that. I've heard you discuss it as a medicine and how microdosing can be so useful. So talk about that for a second.
Well, microdosing, I think sometimes is confusing for people, first of all, because they equate it with psychedelics. And on our show, we just talk about microdosing cannabis. And it can be THC and CBD. And it's really taking small doses to help yourself feel the way that you want to over a consistent period of time. I am definitely a microdoser as well, for sure. My favorite edible dose would be like 2.5 milligrams of THC and 2.5 of CBD. I really don't.
That's about the right combo.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. I mean, for me, cannabis without CBD can make me anxious. It can make me just feel a little bit not the way I want to. So
I agree, Ellen, completely. And it's nice. I've been meeting more and more people with that kind of attitude, because do what we do. If we do a public thing or we're with people, want to just get lit. And they don't understand that's not us. That's not what we do.
No, and I'm sure you encounter, Ellen, a lot of women who they don't want the psychotropic effect. They just want the pain relief, or they just want to alleviate their colitis pain or their nausea or whatever.
Sleep, whatever. Yeah, like a perfect example is sleep. If I microdose, I get a great night's sleep. But if I were to do more than a microdose, that doesn't help me sleep.
No, I don't even like THC for sleep. CBD is amazing for me for sleep.
Is that right?
I found a company called Equilibria, which is women run, based in Chicago. It's an incredible company. And I started taking their gel caps, and I take 25 milligram gel cap before bed. And
no kidding.
Because when I have a small child who's waking up in the middle of the night, and I'm doing all kinds of things,
That's
and I couldn't get back to sleep.
Be sharp. Yeah.
And so I'd never had sleep issues before, and I was so tired, but I kept waking up, and CBD really worked for me. They say that about 30% of people, CBD is activating, so it will keep you up, but 70% of people tend to get some relief from taking just CBD for sleep, and it really works for me.
Right. I find that, now I deal with chronic pain. I find that the combination of THC and CBD, usually 1-to-1 or sometimes 2-to-1.
CBD?
Yes, 2-to-1 CBD to THC is a good combo for me. And, I take a 10 milligram gummy and I cut it in half, and I eat that before bed. And I sleep like a baby. So, Ellen, if there is anything that you would want to convey to our women listeners out there, about you, about Do the Pot, about just demystifying cannabis in general, what's the message you'd like them to know?
You're going to have to experiment a little bit. It's not as easy as opening a bottle of wine.
Right.
It's worth it, because if you can find the right cannabis that works for you, it's a wonderful plant-based way to feel better, or, have more of a sense of well-being. But it will take a little bit of experimenting. So we hope that our show helps to take some of the fear or concern or whatever you may be feeling out of it. We have 60 episodes, and it's going to take a little bit of experimenting, though. That's what I would have to say.
That sounds like great advice.
Yeah, and if you ever feel like having a couple of old white guys on the show, give us a call.
Thank you. I will do that.
Yeah. I don't know what we contribute, but
I'm not sure.
We'd love to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really fun podcast. It's very well done. It's very professional. I recommend it highly. Definitely check it out.
Very much so. We've been speaking with Ellen Scanlon, founder and host of How to Do the Pot, available on dothepot.com. And we're going to put that in the show description for you. Thank you, Ellen, for joining us today. And as always, if you enjoyed the program, go on to Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star rating, tell a friend about Vote Pro Podcast. We'd love for you to spread the word. Get in touch with us. Jay, how do they do that?
Send us an email at podcast at VoteProPot.com. Call our message line at 240-257-2441.
And as always, there's so much more that we cover on our social media platforms. So give us a look at Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Just do a search for Vote Pro Pot.